within budget, within time, and he gained notoriety about that time. He was the guy that actually tracked down Typhoid Mary and showed that the typhoid, the person could be a carrier and not have the symptoms of the disease. And this was really kind of the genesis of the talk. Oh, and I forgot to announce at the very beginning my co-conspirators in this talk. Bo Ranheim, who operates the Harbor Survey for New York City DEP, and Eric Monchuk from our office, who prepared some of the information. So I apologize to you guys for not announcing that earlier. But the Harbor Survey began in 1909 and has continued nearly continuously since that time. And this is what Bo's boat looks like these days. And the boats that they used in the lab they used in 1952. So some of the findings, well, they went out and they found that there indeed were hundreds of outfalls. Conditions around those outfalls were in really terrible shape. They were really concerned about the growth of the population, and they warned that indeed the population was going to grow by at least 2 million by 1930, which it did, and that shell fishing and bathing should be restricted above the Narrows. This is population density. I just want to show this, that you can see the density of population around Manhattan and in Brooklyn, and clearly the two areas that were really of great concern were the Harlem River and the Upper East River up in this area, and the Lower East River, where the dissolved oxygen was continuing to plummet and actually went down to zero, as I'll show you in a minute, in the 20s. They went ahead and recommended, they weren't concerned with the individual sewer plans in the various boroughs. They were interested in designing a main drainage plan. So the plan that they came out with actually makes a whole lot of sense even today. It's withstood the time test. What they did was they broke New York City into 4 different quadrants and tried to use as much of the natural drainage as possible. And the key elements were having interceptor sewers in a variety of areas, having the Ward's Island treatment plant as sort of the centerpiece of all of this. And they actually proposed an island to get rid of the sewage from Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn as well, which wasn't that plan was never abandoned until actually the 1930s. So they had a workable plan, and they had one thing that Stoker was very adamant about was he saw the sewage problem as not a single problem of a particular borough or even of a city. He saw it as a regional problem, and he saw that it certainly needed some kind of centralization and sort of overall regional authority. Some sort of regional authority should take over the operation of planning and constructing sewers and eventual treatment plants. And that was not viewed all that well. And in fact, when New York City, when the commission gave their report to New York City, the city had actually formed something called the Sewer Planning Commission in 1913 that was to receive the plan and move ahead. And one of the problems was that at the time the city operated at the Board of Adjustment, the Board of Estimate sort of made monies available, and the borough engineers would implement things. So, in fact, the borough engineers were indeed in control of things, didn't like the idea of having some sort of central control. But one of the points we heard earlier today was this whole idea of how do you get the public interested in what's going on. And it was a very difficult kind of thing. The only group that was out there that was actually making noise was a business group called the Merchants Association. Unfortunately, they took things to a point, and when they became too expensive, they actually worked against the commission and some of the findings, but they were out there. But they also said that they were somewhat handicapped due to the unattractiveness of the topic and the offensive character of the terminology, you can see that they're sort of coming out of Victorian times and a little concerned about how you make that problem stick. But somebody needed to say that the serious problem that affects you is worth spending money. And George Soper actually spent a lot of time, if you go through the archives of the New York Times, you'll find countless articles that he wrote from the time he was in the commission till the time he passed away in the 40s, advocating for more sewage treatment. And one of the interesting things that Bo Ranheim and I found was he actually sponsored a special exhibition at the Museum of Natural History in 1911. And the commission found things in the harbor, like people that were collecting driftwood that had sewage sludge around them. They cautioned people, don't take those things back to your home. It could be a problem. So at the museum, why they didn't just show the pictures, I don't know, at the museum, but they created these little models with people picking up driftwood and taking it home. And they made little models of people digging clams in Jamaica Bay next to sewer outfalls. And they also made some models of the floating bathing establishments that sort of rung Manhattan Island, and were very, very popular. So as I say, that handing off the Metropolitan Sewerage Plan to the Sewer Plan Commission was a rocky road. The major conclusions about interceptor sewers and the need for more dispersion to relieve conditions they were on the same, kind of on the same page with a lot of that. But you can see there was intense turf battles, and there's a supplemental report that the commission prepared that articulates all of this, and you kind of get the sense of frustration on the part of George Soper after years of coming up with this plan and turning it over to people. And, in fact, this commission objected to using the Ward's Island treatment plant because they said the outfall would be in the shallowest part of the harbor. It turns out it's the deepest part of the harbor. So at the end of this, Soper finally says, the city engineers produced a report of misstatements and immature and illogical suggestions. So you can see that we were headed for a delay as soon as this plan was issued. And then we had something that's called World War I that set in after that. So the further planning was somewhat diminished, and even though sewers continued to be constructed, this overall plan was delayed. The 20s were a very, very interesting time. Public health concerns were continuing to grow. Bathing was being banned in badly polluted parts, basically the areas north of the Narrows. There were some typhoid scares, and there were oyster beds that were closed. But I'll make the point, I won't say it anymore, I don't really think these bans really had much to do with actually getting anything done. It may be controversial, we can talk about it later. And then there was political indifference. There was a mayor called Mayor Highland, from Staten Island, Highland Boulevard. He was more interested in building subways